Hello and welcome to Dyslexia Jewels. We are all about inspiring, educating, and encouraging. And I'm so excited to be here today with our special guest. I'm also excited to be here today with my beautiful co-host, Meredith Pope.
Hello, everyone. We are very thankful that we have Dr. Stephen English with us today. And Dr. English is a neurologist at the Mayo Clinic. He was trained at the Mayo Clinic and now he is a neurologist there down in Jacksonville. Thankfully, he's in the warmer Mayo Clinic than the freezing cold Mayo Clinic. But we are honored to have you today to talk about more of the technical side of dyslexia. Janie and I always talk about the mom side and the teacher side, but today we are getting a little deeper into dyslexia, and we're going to let Dr. English tell us what is dyslexia for those of us who need more scientific version.
Well, that's a great question, and I think that dyslexia is probably the end result of several different processes in the brain. So it's the symptoms that, like you said, that you as a mom and teachers experience. But I think the neurologic origin of dyslexia is probably several different diseases or several different things going on that can result in the same problem. But taking it kind of at its core kind of root name here, dyslexia is dys, which is kind of not or difficult, and then lexia is like lexicon, it's words. So dyslexia is difficulty with words, and we use dys a lot in neurology and in medicine, so people can have dyscalculia or difficulty with calculation, dysgraphia or difficulty with writing, dysphagia, difficulty with swallowing, so we use it a lot. But for dyslexia, we're talking specifically about words, and that's both reading words through sight and also the pronunciation or the phonologic discussion with words. So at its core, it's just difficulty with words, but I think there's a lot of different more complicated things or nuances to what actually manifests or causes dyslexia.
That was a great explanation.
Yeah. I guess as a person with dyslexia, I think about, some of my greatest challenges, like in school, even now, if someone starts talking and they're doing like sequence, so they're going to tell me 5 things, and it's very frustrating to me because I know I'm not going to be able to follow that. So what is it about the brain, a dyslexic brain, that makes like sequence so hard?
That's I guess, how much time do you have? Because we could get very, very detailed. But it's really fascinating because people with dyslexia, they have a normal IQ. So it's not that this is not an information, knowledge issue or ability to learn issue. It's simply a processing speed. And as you can imagine, language is such a crucial part of being a human being. So sometimes the processing speed difficulties really truly manifest as a language disorder. But I think you're getting kind of right at the crux of the problem. When you're talking about sequences, you're having to focus intently on what's first, what's second, what's third, and you're having a difficult time, hearing the words and then being able to kind of bring that in and use that for your own knowledge. And that's why the approach to education in people with dyslexia needs to be different. But there's many different things neurologically, I think, that can contribute to disorders of processing speed and language. So I think that's maybe another question that we could tease out here in the next few minutes.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you a question, and I hope I can describe this the right way. So I read an article, and I tried so hard to find it before I had you on our show. And it was talking about how it was comparing 3 different types of brains. So you have your dyslexic brain, you have your, I guess, non-dyslexic brain, and then your autistic brain. Mm-hmm. And they were comparing the spaces between the neurons in the brain. And the article went on to say that, people with dyslexia have a larger space between the neurons. People with non-dyslexic brains, or your average reader, would have the perfect amount, if you will, I hate to say perfect, but the appropriate spacing between the neurons. And then people with autism have hardly any space between the neurons. The neurons touch each other and rub. Is that an adequate description?
I think that's at a very basic term, I think that does make a lot of sense. And so the way I think about this is it starts at really day one when our brains are developing before we're born. And if you can think about it, I think everything spreads out when we're born, right? We start as one cell and then everything kind of moves out as we grow. And the brain is no different. So it's kind of like, I think of this as like a bike tire. So you've got the middle part, and then things will grow outwards. All the neurons will grow out, and it should form a perfect round tire with at the outside at the end of development. Now, the issue is that the tire should have, 6 different layers. Basically, there's 6 different cortical layers, the cortex, or that outer part. And so I had a professor talk to me like it was lasagna, and he was an Italian guy. But if you can think about when you make lasagna, you've got each individual layer. Now, if you just decided not to layer it at all and throw all the ingredients in there, it would still taste delicious, but it's not lasagna. You know what I mean? So the idea that each neuron, as it develops, knows it's going to go to, the 3rd layer or the 2nd layer or the 1st layer. And sometimes they don't go where they're supposed to go. So the layers are a little bit mixed up. So I think that's one of the problems. And then you can imagine each of these neurons, they grow branches like trees. And so I think this is what you're getting at with the space between them. So you can imagine, I'm not a gardener, but if what happens as we develop is we grow a bunch of different branches. So each of our neurons has an abundance of these branches. And then as we are, starting in our earliest stages of life, we're deciding which branches are going to be useful and which are not. So we start to cut the branches we don't need. And so sometimes what happens, I think, in autism is that there's too many branches and we don't have an effective pruning mechanism. So it actually kind of gets in the way of processing. And there is a theory about dyslexia where there may not be enough branches to begin with, or enough of these kind of tree limbs to begin with. But I think that's probably true and explains some of dyslexia, but probably not the entire picture.
Okay, yeah, that does help me understand it. So do you feel like if a parent suspects dyslexia and they are tested and they are, do you think that there is a brain scan or what are the different scans, if you will, that do they show them, and what are they?
That I see this a lot, actually, and I deal with I see a lot of concussion in clinic as well, and concussion's a similar problem because we don't have good scans yet to identify. We have MRI scans are great. They're highly valuable for structure, so you can see that the connections are there. I mean, but it's purely just you're just looking at it. So you can see the lasagna is stacked appropriately, but you can't really tell how those cells are communicating with one another. Okay. There's no way to identify function of the brain. And I think that's what we're getting at more with dyslexia, is that there's functional abnormalities. The communication between the cells is abnormal or is not functioning the way it should. So that's, I think, something much more difficult to tell. Now, there are research studies with what we call functional MRIs, which basically look at when you put somebody in an MRI machine, you actually start to have them do tasks. So you can say, okay, start to spell the word world forwards and backwards, and it measures how much blood goes to a certain part of the brain. So you can start to get some quantifiable information about how functional a brain is. But this is an extremely difficult test that requires somebody to lay perfectly still, number one, and also cooperate with these multiple level testing. Now, I am not a parent yet, but I can only imagine how difficult these studies would be to investigate children, if you follow me.
So
we're not there yet.
Mine lying still for that long, nor myself. I would.
So sit still for an hour and follow the instructions is a difficult.
If I fell asleep, I could, but I wouldn't be able to do my words backwards.
No. but I think we're starting to get there and have a better idea about how our brain is connected. And I think that's it's the connectivity between cells that's going to be, I think, really helpful to tell us, what is dyslexia. And I think, my hunch is that it's not all dyslexia. You're going to have 6 different varieties based on what's the core problem. And we're starting to notice this in other diseases that, there's certain genetic mutations that cause something. There's certain, but at the end result is people have difficulty reading. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
I suspect that there's going to be multiple different problems leading to the same kind of phenotype, the same thing that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. Yes.
So what we tried to do, being dyslexic and, having a son that was, and I mean, Meredith is dyslexic and has children. And so we want to see the positive side of that. So I would just like to kind of hear from you, what would you say to someone who has dyslexia, maybe a mom who has a child who has dyslexia, that would encourage her or help her to understand what is going on? Because for a lot of people, dyslexia is still a word they haven't even heard, or it can be very scary.
Yeah.
So what is some good news?
Yes.
Well, I think I already mentioned in one way that there's no IQ difference, right? So I think the way that I look about it, it's not a disability. I think the sky is the limit for anybody. So I think we need to foster education early on and just recognize that everybody learns differently. And so I think that there should be, I think we have to remove the taboo associated with dyslexia. We have to kind of, the negative connotation, I think frankly shouldn't be there. But I learn differently than, the person next to me in medical school. And so we just have to recognize and use technology and use new information that comes available to tailor our education system so that nobody feels like there's any limitation or disability. In fact, that I think we're getting there in some ways. And I think that no matter what, we should be nurturing our children so that they recognize that this is nothing that should hold them back in life.
Oh, that was wonderfully said. Thank you so much. I love that. And, I just wanted to also add before we end, teachers and administrators, if you're out there listening, we cannot emphasize enough the use of structured literacy programs in your schools and your communities. Dr. English just said it. I didn't have to. Structured literacy programs like Orton Gillingham and Wilson, they help students learn no matter what their brain type is. Children learn to read with this program, and I highly recommend it. It opens up those brain pathways and it gives them a chance. Please, if you have not thought about adopting those programs in your school, please, they really significantly help. They've helped my children learn to read, and it has made the biggest difference in our lives. Dr. English, thank you very much for joining us today. I know our viewers have loved hearing you and understanding more about the technical and the medical side of dyslexia. Janie and I are here, everyone. We're here for a shoulder or an ear or anything you need if you need dyslexia guidance.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a privilege to speak with you, and thank you for all the work you're doing for children with dyslexia. I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to share what I know, put things in a positive light.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Couldn't really end on a better note than that. Focus on the positive, and please know that we are here for you. As I said, we're here to inspire and encourage, and just helping everyone with dyslexia to live their best, most powerful life. Thank you so much.